Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Social Sciences Colloquium and Seminar course in the Sociology Department at Yeditepe University. Today, we are joined by Rebekka Endler for a lecture on a topic that's highly relevant at the global level, but also very timely for Turkey at the national level on political, social, and cultural grounds. Speaking for myself, my students, and my department, I thank you, Rebekka, for accepting my invitation to join us today. Rebekka will give her talk based on her book, originally titled Das Patriarchat der Dinge, Warum die Welt Frauen nicht passt, which is translated into Turkish as Eşyaların Partiyarkası, Dünya Kadınlara Neden Uymaz. In this gripping and thought-provoking book, Rebekka traces the male-dominated world of design and calls our attention to how our everyday items of utility, from cars to toys to bicycles and pieces of clothing, as well as our constructs of social design, such as cities, public spaces, language, legislation, politics, and even medical methods of diagnosis and treatment, are designed for men. As stated in the back cover of her book, Rebekka takes a feminist look at our taken-for-granted socially constructed environment and invites us to develop a new sense of awareness regarding the male domination that has permeated our social environment through everyday things. Now, our students, Elçin and Miray, will first formally introduce Rebekka to you, and then we'll leave the floor to Rebekka for her talk. Elçin and Miray, the mic is yours.
Hi, everyone. Today, as I said earlier, my teacher, moderator are me and Miray. Today, our guest, Rebekka Endler. Now I leave the words of the guest legacy give to information about the guest and her book to Miray.
First of all, welcome. Thank you for participating in our lesson. Rebekka Endler was born in 1984, is a journalist, writer, and podcaster based in Cologne, Germany. His first book, Patriarchy of Things, deals with patriarchal conceptions of everyday life, and was published in 2021. Currently being translated into multiple languages. Author very happy. At the same time, Rebekka Endler studied social sciences in the cities of Cologne and Freiburg with the idea of collecting information about society to write detective stories. Instead, she discovered that one of the greatest crimes was the patriarchy, and that detective stories did not serve to change the patriarchy. The book we are reading, Patriarchy of Things, is a 2021 by journalist Rebekka Endler, journalist and writer Rebekka Endler, living in Germany, had her anger that pushed her to publish a book called The Patriarchy of Things. Endler got into this feeling, which is not suitable for women 2 years ago, after a radio show he prepared. And then the author Rebekka Endler decided to publish this book. Finally, Endler focuses on many areas such as the design of public space, the diagnosis and treatment forms of medicines, the ways in which technology is developed, and how culture is shaped, and this with the construction of the word for gezinen, with a very comprehensive view. He presents us with a variety of material that the pocket of his pants, the design of the car, the office chair, the robe of a lawyer, the contents of Wikipedia, even the treatment for heart attacks. That is the real word is for cisman. Sorry, thank you for listening to me. I give the floor to my friends Elçin.
Thank you. I'm ask your question. What is the patriarchal design?
Well, before the questions, I think we should give the floor to Rebekka for her talk, and then we'll move on to the questions.
Of course.
Okay. So, Rebekka, please.
Thank you for this extended introduction. I see you've found the Wikipedia article that was written about me, which is funny because there's things inside there that I remember saying more than 10 years ago, and somebody dug them up and put them into my Wikipedia article, and I think it's very funny. For example, that I was going to write detective stories. I don't remember where I ever said this, but apparently I did. And it's funny to hear that back. So thank you for the introduction. Yes, I'm very happy and honored to be talking to you on this day that I can only imagine for a lot of you must be quite a tough day to just attend university and just to keep going and studying, especially social sciences. So thank you for being here. And I prepared a not very insightful, but still maybe worthy presentation that I'm going to try to show. 1 second. Okay. Can you all see it? Yes? Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I was a journalist before I became a book author, and it was never my plan intentionally to get into writing essays. It was more something that happened to me because I was working for public radio in Germany. And in 2019, I was asked by a radio station to produce a 5-minute piece about potty parity, which is a social movement, especially in Great Britain, focusing on getting rid of the inequality of public access to toilets and advocating for more public toilets accessible to women, accessible to people with disabilities, senior citizens. So I researched this and I found a PhD thesis of a woman that wrote her PhD in the 90s about the history of patriarchy and canalization systems in big European cities. And I called her up, and after this interview, which took about 20 minutes, I realized that in spite of having studied social sciences, I never really made a connection between my personal life and patriarchy, although I had spent my entire life waiting in lines, in really long lines, in order to get access to a toilet in public, for example, at music festivals or at the movies, or even when you go, because class doesn't really matter with these issues. You can also go to watch the opera, and in the break, you will have to wait a long time before accessing a toilet. So this is when I realized that this was actually a structural problem and something that did not change much in the past 200 years. So instead of, I did the 5-minute piece and it was great, but then I thought I should investigate more on this because Bettina Möllring, that's the name of the professor, she also told me about this Dutch activist who had gone to court because she was fined with a mandate for peeing in public, although there was no toilet accessible for her at night. So I wanted to do a 1-hour radio program on potty parity and patriarchy. And I pitched it to all the radio stations that I worked for and that I already had done 1-hour-long programs, and also to the magazines that I used to write for. And everybody politely declined. And everybody told me that this is not really a social issue or a political issue. So nobody wanted to write about this or give it space to be discussed. And this was the first time that I got just a bunch of rejections. And I got really mad because I could tell that it was important. And Bettina Möllring, who had been advocating for this for years and years, she told me, you know what, this is exactly what happens to me. I am invited to podiums. She's a professor for industrial design and she still keeps designing urinals. And she told me she gets invited to speak on podiums and politicians like to take pictures with her because it's always fun to have a lady on stage talking about peeing. It's entertaining. But when it comes to social changes and when it comes to actually putting something in motion that will lead to a real change, to more accessibility, to people discussing the culture around it, there's like a brick wall or a glass ceiling, depending on which metaphor you feel more familiar with. And I was hitting this brick wall that she had been hitting for the past 20 years. So this is when I decided, okay, in that case, I will just turn this into something else. And since I had this one moment of my mind being blown, I decided to look into other areas. Oh, by the way, this is the story of the Dutch protagonist, which I'll get into it a little bit. But I noticed there's also an interesting cultural thing that whenever I speak with Turkish people, they are a lot less comfortable with talking about toilets and pee-pee than, for example, in France, where the French just love to talk about bathrooms and going to the toilet. So I will try to keep this part shorter, but sorry, because this is my entrance point into the whole subject, so it needs to be discussed. Well, and then the idea was, okay, I need to find another way to make this knowledge available to a bigger audience. So then I decided I should look into other areas. And if I'm able to find how the material world, although it's not only material world, I just say stuff or things, are designed in a specific way by men for men. And if I'm able to find more examples of this, this might be a good book. So this was the idea. And then I can tell you, I very fast had enough material to write a proposal, because when you're going to write a non-fictional essay, you first do a draft of a proposal and you write, I intend to be kind of like an academic paper, just maybe a little bit longer. And then you send this off to publishing companies. And I quickly sold the proposal for the book because I couldn't find any aspects of our daily lives that wasn't touched by patriarchal design in itself. Be it, I mean, you gave a little review, medicine, workspace, even the way our taxes are done, whole judicial systems, everything is touched by design that is in its core patriarchal. So it was a big topic, and I sent this off to publishing companies, and I quickly got people interested. And then the moment I sold the proposal, another book dropped. Maybe you've heard of it, but in 2020, there's a book that was published called Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez. I think it's also been translated in Turkish, and she focuses on the gender data gap, but it is a book of the main topic. And when I realized, I heard of her in a podcast, I was running and I had just sold my proposal. So I was on a high, because when you sell something, it's the first book that I ever wrote. I was like very pumped. And then I heard a podcast where she was the guest and she talked about the book, and I stopped my running and I just screamed and cried, because I thought, oh my God, she just wrote the book that I'm supposed to write, and it's already there. The book is out and it's a success. It's being translated. Nobody is gonna need to read my book. And then thankfully I had a talk with the publishing lady who told me, you know what, the way you think about this is also patriarchal design. Think about how many books have been written, for example, on the FC Bayern, a German soccer team. Nobody says, oh, there's already 20 books about the FC Bayern, which is just one soccer team. But you immediately go into, my book is going to be unnecessary because has been one book about this issue written by another woman last year. This is not a way to think about this. And she was right. Actually, now it's been out in the world for 2 years, and I still, whenever I'm around people who think maybe to write a book, and I have young authors and people who want to write asking me, and I'm always happy to give advice. But the thing is, if you have something that you're interested in and that you see that could be of value to society, don't think, oh, whatever I'm doing or I'm planning on doing is unnecessary, because there cannot be enough books about social injustices and things that you want to change in this world and change that you want to see in this world. So yeah, that's just my little inspirational thing. So then I actually started writing it. And first, this is a picture taking of the example of language, because other than in Turkish, the German language is incredibly gendered. So we don't have the same, I guess in Turkish there are pronouns, and there's a gender neutral pronoun, which is just o. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes. We don't have this in the German language. We don't have this in the French language. So everything is deeply gendered. And also the way we talk about, for example, this example is taken from the way people ascribe virtuous things such as bravery in the German language, in the French, Spanish language, in English. Its bravery is in the testicles. So there's a lot of metaphors in all of these European languages which attribute having big balls, being ballsy, as being very brave. And I looked into how this came to be and how this is in itself attributing and contributing to gender constructions of what is a typical male, what is a typical female, how do they behave. So yeah, this is an example from that, because language constructs the way we think about stuff too. It's not only our brain that constructs language, but it works in both ways. And in Germany now there's a big movement to try to get rid of the generic masculine versions of things, which leads us to, when we talk about a group of people and there is people of all genders, the regular German thing would be to address them all as men. And it's been like this for the past 100 years. And now we make a little stop, like for example, you are TeilnehmerInnen. So we make a mixture between the feminine and the masculine version. And there's a lot of people who absolutely hate it, who are gutted, very conservative right-wing people. They immediately bust into flames when they hear that. But we think, just because we know from social sciences and from psychology, we know how it shapes the brain, and to choose a more inclusive language is to also include people in your thoughts, and also that leads to designing for all kinds of people if you include them in your thoughts. So this is why language is so important. Also, language is just something that is free. Language, of course, is very there's a class element to who gets to talk and how we get to talk, but acquiring a language, using a language, and also changing the way we talk is an exercise that is very uncostly, unlike other changes, which are much more costly. So this is why I think it's a good way to, it's a good starting point. And I know from a Turkish friend whose mother is a very high up, she works in a state institution, and she gives people grants if they need money for things. And she's a woman, but apparently she told me that her social status is so high that people address her as Han, like a man. They say her name, but then they add to it Mr. I don't really remember what it was in Turkish. Maybe you can help me out, but how do I say Mr.? Is it Han?
You say, no, you say Bey.
Oh, yeah. And then the next higher up, if, is there something even more like a master?
Not that I can think of. Can anyone think?
To woman, hanım.
No, hanım
No.
would be a female.
I will. She wrote it to me. I will send it to the addendum. I can show you this example, because for me it was funny just to see that in every language there is this mental thing where there is not really the right words to find for a really high up lady boss. So you just go back to addressing her as if she was a man. Yeah.
I'm also curious, so I'll be interested in finding out from you.
I will send it to you. I made a mental note.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, this is a very fun design example from the household world. And these are two objects that were designed by a Swedish industrial designer called Karin Ehrenberger. And she noticed that appliances and power tools, even the word appliance and power tool, there's already like a very gendered connotation to it. But in the way that they are designed, they have in themselves a description of the value of the activity that is supposed to be done with it. So she designed these two objects. The one, Dolphia, is a drill. And in the original, I wasn't allowed in my book to put pictures of original things in it because it was too difficult to get the rights. So at the point I was like, okay, fine, I'm not going to put pictures in my book. I'm just going to draw the things, and then people can just Google it. So I think it worked well. But so in the original, the drill is in a very light blue and white, and it's a small drill, and it only has 3 functions. It can go one way, the other way, and then you can switch it off. And also you see the font, the way the letters are shaped, it has a very feminine touch to it. And on the other side, there's a mixer that is meant to make soup, you know, the one that you just make soup with. But this one is designed in a dark green and black. It has 27 different gears, and the buttons are in a bright orange, kind of like the orange that you would find on a gun, like a hunting gun, or on a drill or on a saw. And she showed these two objects to people of all genders and just asked them to associate freely about what they see and who they think this was made for. And interestingly enough, people of all genders were quite clear that the drill looked cheap, that the drill looked ineffective and weak, and that it was designed specifically for women. Whereas the mixer, people said it looked professional and powerful, but nobody associated it with being for men making soup. So the part of for men was implicit. And this shows that a lot of the ways things are designed, the quote unquote normal thing is made for men and it's implicit, whereas there's a female version that is often more expensive, in bright pink and lilac colors or with glitter, and that is also less functional, that is made for women. So this is, now we're going into the gender marketing aspect of the whole thing. We found this with computers. So even in 2010, the computer company Dell made a tiny little notebook specifically for women, which was also more expensive than your everyday laptop that was state of the art in 2010, but it also was less powerful. And when you open it up, the entrance into it was a web page that they installed from Della, where you could share recipes and your daily workout. So this just goes to show that they did not ask women what they wanted or what they needed. They just assumed from what they were thinking women might need or want or how they should behave. And from this assumption, they created something that went on the market and that thankfully enough was mocked for a week or two and then taken off the market because there was no need for this type of thing. And the laptop that its only perk is that it fits into a handbag is not something that people are thankfully willing to spend a lot of money on. So yes. Oh, now I'm sorry. Somebody is mowing the lawn right in front of my office window. I hope the audio still works, but this is what's happening.
Oh.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, perfectly. I don't even hear the mowing sound.
Oh, okay. Then it's just me who I have trouble concentrating because apparently it takes 3 guys to mow a lawn outside my window. But yeah. Now we're moving into, because the gender marketing thing is something, it's bothersome and it's harmful, but it does not cost lives. But there is a lot of area where a design that is not gendered, because this was the section where useless gendered design, and now we're moving on into not gendered design, which is very harmful for a lot of people, not only cis women, but there's a lot of people who are affected by it. By the way, is everyone familiar with the term cis women and cis male, or should I quickly explain, because it gets more tricky in the medicine and car safety section? I'll just explain very quickly. So cis women and cis men are people that were born, and at the moment they were born, they saw, oh, this person has a vulva, so we assign her the gender women, and the person grows up being a woman, as opposed to a trans woman, which has been assigned the gender male at birth, but grows up being a woman. This is the trans woman, and same for trans and cis men. And then we also have inter and not binary people, which is a big problem that they often are not, when there's academic research, these categories, especially in medical research, they don't show up. So this was a big problem for me, because I tried to be very gender inclusive, but in medical research, there's just categories that are male and female, so you're not able to make distinctions, which would be very important for later topics that we're going to discuss, but this is not how the data is collected up to this date. But this is an example from car safety. And for the longest time after cars had been invented, car safety was surprisingly not a big topic. People thought that when they were getting into accidents, and more people, of course, were getting into accidents because cars became more and more available to the everyday consumer. But for the longest time, it was just called the Jesus factor, whether a person survived or not. And it was only after somebody actually collected data that they figured out that design and design elements could be a huge potential factor to save lives. This is when they stopped just using plain glass as windshields, for example, or you got your steering wheel that would collapse before. Actually, you would get into an accident and the glass shards would just like kill you if you were very unlucky. So these little design tweaks happened like not even 100 years ago. And then more and more things came up, such as a safety belt, for example, which is, I know people in Turkey are still a little bit sometimes not using it, but here in Germany, it's mandatory, and you will not see people driving around without their safety belts on, because for one, if you get stopped by police, it's really, really expensive. And also we kind of see why, because it saves lives. Well, anyways, so design in cars became a huge topic, but it was not until 2011 that gendered data was collected, which happened also for a reason, because as long as you're not collecting specific data, there is no need for changes, because you cannot change something you actually don't know is an issue. Even though you maybe, if you are a car company, you feel that this might be an issue, but the longer you don't know, the less money you have to spend on changing it. So it wasn't until 2010, 2011 that gendered data on car crashes and on injuries was made available. And surprise, it turned out that cis women in accidents have a lot higher risk of being severely injured than a cis male. There's not only the gender aspect to it, there's also age plays a huge role, how old the people are in the car that is getting crashed. Their body weight is also something that needs actually to be adjusted for, but for the longest time it wasn't counted, because when a new car gets built and is released on the market, it has to, in the EU and also in the US, it needs to do 5 different types of car crashes, and all these car crashes are being done with crash test dummies that are designed specifically to mimic a 40-year-old male, 40-year-old cis male behind the wheel. There is one smaller crash test dummy that is also used, but it's used on the passenger side. And the smaller one is often called by car companies the female dummy, because they don't like it when you say they don't have a female dummy. So they tell you, oh no, we do have a female dummy. But what it is it's just a smaller version of the male dummy. But these like dummies are way more complicated than they actually look like, because they have to mimic body morphology. They have to mimic a center of gravity inside the body. They have to mimic density of bones and all these things. So when you just make a smaller male version that does, I mean, we are not just smaller men. There's different things that need to be adjusted for and that are not adjusted for up till this day. And in Sweden is actually the leading country for more gender equality in car design, because they made a specific institute researching this. And Astrid Linde is the director of it, and she designed crash test dummies of different genders, different ages also. And but they are still not the norm, and they're still not used in car crashes up to this day. You could not, even if you went out and said, I want a car that is specifically adjusted for my personal injury risk as a cis woman, there is none, absolutely none. So it's a big topic, and whenever it's discussed, for example, we had almost well, it's not a media scandal per se, but there was this thing 1.5 years ago where a German politician went up on a stage and demanded political reforms so that gendered crash test dummies would be used. And it was immediately taken by a very populist media, and they made fun of her for weeks and weeks, saying, oh, the gender gaga and wokeism and all these buzzwords. And she actually retracted. And I asked her for an interview for my next book, and she was like, I'm very sorry, but I promised to myself, my husband, and my children that I'm never going to address this again publicly, because there was just too much hate going on. So, and I respect this, of course, it's her choice, but that's just to show how heated this is. And what it comes down to is that it's about survivor risks, and it's still up to this day very unequally distributed. Also, we would need, because there, you might ask, well, it's all very costly, and what is the solution? Well, Astrid Linde developed car seats also that adjust for certain body weights. For example, if you are a really fat person, you need a different car seat in order to be safe than if you are a very, very slim person. Also, old age is something that design can adjust for it. Actually, the design solutions are often not that complicated to come up with. It's that we live in a world of capitalism, and that it's really hard to make big companies rethink their policy of maximizing just their revenue and actually thinking about the people who are using their cars or airplanes and all that. So yeah, this is this car safety and medicine. Oh, I'm going to do medicine here because I don't have a picture for medicine, so stick with the dummy for a little longer. In Western medicine, which funnily enough, in Germany, we usually don't talk about Western medicine, but we say Schulmedizin, which is called academic medicine, but it's just a very white supremacist term, because it assumes that every medicine that was developed in other parts of the world is not academic, in the terms that there is no school of thought behind it, which is a problem. So this is why I use the term Western medicine. But Western medicine in all of its history is very problematic. So we'll just do a little bit of the highlights. But for example, pharmaceuticals drugs that you can buy, medicine that you can buy in the drugstore for the longest time, up till just a few years ago. If we're talking about aspirin or paracetamol, ibuprofen, all these substances, all these drugs, they have been developed and researched exclusively on cis male. And it used to be a little bit different, but in the 70s there was a drug that was sold here over the counter. You did not need a prescription for it. That was sold especially and marketed especially to pregnant women in order to be able to sleep, and to children. And the thing was that this product was very unsafe to use for pregnant women, and for a long time nobody knew it, and there was a lot of babies being born with very short arms or short legs or other deformities. Some caused death and others survived. And when it was journalists who actually broke the story, and it was a huge deal all over Europe. And then there was a lot of claims and how do you say? So people sued the company who made this drug, and they were awarded money, of course, because the company had not done due diligence, and they had just marketed something that was not safe. So in order to prevent this from happening, all the pharmaceutical companies suddenly were scared that this might happen to them too. So what they did was they decided, and they put it into law, that pharmaceutical tests were to be done only on persons who they were 100% sure were not pregnant. So this, in one swoosh, just excluded all cis female in their reproductive age, which also means, because there's very few senior citizens who want to participate and partake in drug tests, because it's probably very strenuous on your body, and also children are per se excluded. So this meant that with one take, all the cis women were excluded from all pharmaceutical trials for, I think, up to 30 years. So, and one other effect of this was that actually drugs might be available for diseases that are particularly, for example, people with uteruses. I don't know if you heard of endometriosis, which is a disease that can affect anybody who has a uterus, and it means that cells that are usually inside the uterus start growing in other places and start being very, very painful during the period or the menstruation. And some have even cells in their lungs. It's incredibly painful. And guesses are that about 20% of all people who menstruate actually have endometriosis. So it's huge. But up till a few years, people had never heard of this. There is still, the research on endometriosis is in its baby shoes. And the reason for this is that there might be even medicine available to treat this, just we haven't found out yet, because one of the side effects of only including cis male in the trial is that when, after the first tests, the results are not what people expected to be, then the drug is dropped. It's called an orphaned drug, and it's just put back on a shelf, never to be touched again, which means that drugs that might help for specific cis female problems might still be undiscovered or ended up in a shelf as orphan drugs. The other thing is that it was very comfortable for science, not only for pharmaceutical companies, but for science in general, to exclude women in their trials. We see this even with mice, actually. So this was one of the moments where I realized, oh, we have misogyny not only amongst humans, but it's also a topic amongst the animal world, because when you do trials with mice, you need to adjust for hormonal changes, and we know that people, when they're on their periods, there is hormonal changes. So the way that they were thinking was, this might affect the results, so let's exclude all the female mice out of our trials. But the same logic is, if it might affect the results, then it would also affect the results on women. But not that important. So they are often left out. And it's just now that things are changing, because gender medicine has become a research area. It has become a field. Last year in Germany, the second gender medicine institute opened. I do not know if there is a gender medicine institute in Turkey, but more and more countries are seeing that the way treatment works, the way anamnesis or of certain diseases work, or even with one example also, that it's not only about medicine, it's also about the way people are socialized and work and perform their gender roles, is, for example, the diagnosis of autism. So in order to diagnose autism, there is different catalogs that have been researched and made available to, to doctors in order to put up a diagnosis. But the way that these catalogs of questions have been done is they have been written specifically to look for symptoms that present in cis male patients, which means that a girl with autism who presents differently because she has been socialized in a world that expects different behaviors from her, does not present with the same symptoms than, let's say, her brother. So it takes a lot longer for women and girls to be diagnosed correctly with autism, to get help that they need, just because the instruments that have been developed in order to come up with a diagnosis are also specifically designed for the male. And it's not an oversight that has been done on purpose, but it's still something that needs to be addressed. So there's the physical body issues, and then there's also the way people are being socialized that plays a big role in the medical field. Another example that goes on the other direction, because often I'm asked, well, are male also disadvantaged by patriarchy? And the answer is yes, in different forms, but also the way that gender roles are constructed, for example, discriminates for a man who has depression to get their correct diagnosis fast enough. Because when a man is suffering, medical doctors assume that something physical is causing the pain, and it takes up to 7 years longer to get a diagnosis for a depression, just because it doesn't fit the stereotype of being a strong man. And this is also why, for example, suicide rates are a lot higher amongst men. It's the same patriarchal design problem. So yeah, that's a very dire topic. How long have I been talking? Do you know?
40 minutes.
Oh, okay. So I'll jump to so this part I will leave it up to you to read. It's about internet and the way social media is also patriarchal design, which bodies are constructed to be desirable, which person is allowed to show themselves naked and who is not and why, and how it discriminates against body types. And but let's go to a little bit more fun, but still a very important topic, and as is the way clothes are deeply gendered, and how this was my second big moment of, oh, okay, now I get it. The first one was the toilet situation, and that is that there is a reason why it's so hard to find clothes that have proper pockets in female dressings, because a lot of skirts and whatever do not even have pockets. And if you wear jeans like I do, most of the pockets are just decorative. And this is an example from 1944, and it's been made as a joke, but it still holds truth. And this is how many pockets are designed in typical male attire and typical female attire. And I think the count was 26 pockets on the men attire and 2 very small pockets on the female attire. And this is also, you can trace this back to beginning of the 1900s. There's a reason for it, just like with the public toilet. Patriarchy has a way of drawing a red line across history, and sometimes we forget about it and we just don't question why things are the way that they are. But with pockets, you can trace the same red line from beginning of the 1900s. And I won't get into too much details, just know that the pocket issue is something that, funnily enough, when journalists or politicians or other people are trying to pick on one specific thing to ridicule the entire topic of gender design, they will always pick the pocket issue, because it seems so unimportant and it's easy to make fun of it. And it's just internationally, it's just me, not just me, who gets picked on for writing about the history of pockets, but there has been the exact same thing in France with a journalist who wrote an op-ed about how poorly designed pockets are. And there has been the same thing in Great Britain. It's funny, it's really systematic how they think they can discredit the entire topic just talking about pockets and making us seem like hysterical feminists just because we want bigger pockets. I'm not gonna go on the streets and manifest to get bigger pockets. That's not the issue. It's more a symptom that fits into a bigger history. So this is why the pocket issue is important to me. But yeah. This is I'm going to end with this, and it's about public space, because I try to show in my book also positive examples of how design can shape our perspective and our look on the world. And there's a part of a cemetery in Hamburg, which is in the biggest cemetery of the world, and it's a big park. It's a beautiful, if you ever find yourself in Hamburg, it's really worth to go for a stroll there. And there's a garden that is called Garten der Frauen, which translates to the Garden of Women. And it comes from a historian who found a graveyard, a headstone from a resistance fighter from the Nazis. And the headstone, after 25 years, if nobody pays for the grave to be kept, they are all taken off, because I guess too many people are dying, and then the space is liberated and somebody else gets to be buried there. And she saved the headstone because she thought, oh, this lady was a resistance fighter against the Nazis. We cannot forget about her. She deserves to be known, and she deserves to have a place in the public space where people can find out about her. So she saved the headstone, and she wrote a lot of obnoxious letters to the cemetery people until they gave her a space big enough to create her own micro cemetery inside the old cemetery. And it's amazing because unlike patriarchal, how do I say, things such as power, such as money, such as public recognition, who are all in themselves patriarchal design, are completely taken out of the equation in this garden. So you will find the exact same, every woman that is buried there has a one-page short biography written on her, and it does not matter if she was a politician, if she was a nanny, if she was working in a supermarket, stuff like power or it's taken out of the equation. Everybody has the same space, everybody gets a biography, everyone has a life worth writing about, and it's very refreshing to go read about these people because they are canonically always taken out of history, because this is how history works. History is, I mean, there's the saying, history is written by the winners, but yes, there's a truth to it. This is why, for example, street names are often male. And I know that in Turkey, there's schools and libraries named after women, but I think all of these women are just the sister or the mother of some important men. So they are not recognized for their value in themselves. And this is how the construction of fame, who is remembered and why they are remembered, they also follow patriarchal design. So it's nice to have a space where you realize, oh, and you can start rethinking, why would the life of some pilots be more important than the life of a beggar? And yeah, it's a good space to talk about this. And maybe final anecdote on how working on this also affected other people. So when I went to visit the cemetery, it was in 2020, I was on the premises on the cemetery, not on the Garten der Frauen itself, but on the cemetery, and I got catcalled by 3 men in a minivan saying like slurs to me. And I had it on tape because I was doing also a radio documentary. So I actually had men accosting me on tape, and I used this tape in an audio documentary that I did on the cemetery. And unbeknownst to me, somebody from the cemetery listened to this because it was diffused in public radio. And then a lady showed up at one of my readings, and she told me that from now on, all the people on the cemetery have workshops that they have to attend against sexual harassment of women and of other people, because these were cemetery employees who did this. So it had an immediate effect on other people, and now they have to do training so that stuff like this does not happen again. And I thought this was really nice because at that moment I felt a little bit powerful, just a little bit. Yeah. So this is just my favorite drawing. So this is at the end. If you want to know while she is picking penises, I can send you the PDF of my book, or you can buy it. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rebekka. What I like about your book and your presentation was that you give such real life examples that makes it easier for us to make a connection between our personal lives and the patriarchy that surrounds us, and even seeps into our brain and our language. And that's interesting to think about. So let's take a break for 10 minutes. And when we get back, we're going to do the question and answers. So my time is 5:05 now. Let's meet back here in 5:15.
Okay.
Our time. Okay. See you in 10 minutes.